Will you be working with him at that time?
No, I think we should have finished the film by then. I'll be working with him from March through the end of June or something like that.
Do you ever stop working?
Oh, God, yes. I sometimes don't do a picture for a year and a half.
On a March morning in 2007, all of Hollywood was shaken when Hollywood Truth magazine unexpectedly published an article with a headline that nearly took the breath away from the entire entertainment industry: The Secret Notebook of Burt Lancaster, the legendary star of From Here to Eternity, the man who once marched alongside Martin Luther King in historic demonstrations, had been found. But what was uncovered was not a memoir, but rather a list of 14 names, all of them towering icons of the Golden Age individuals whom Burt Lancaster did not hesitate to label outright as the most vicious people Hollywood had ever produced. In the final writings of his life, he forcefully exposed the dark side of those who had once been idolized and celebrated by the whole world. Who were they truly? And in the end, what could have driven a man as principled and upright as Burt Lancaster to leave behind such heavy words as if casting a bitter curse? To seek the answer to all those questions, let us begin with the very first name. Also, the one Burt declared to be the most vicious of all, Kirk Douglas. 1. Kirk Douglas, the Predator, disguised as a human. Kirk Douglas, once celebrated as a silver screen legend with his illustrious heroic roles, concealed within himself the nature of a true monster. In Burt Lancaster's Secret Notebook, Douglas did not merely appear as a leading star, but as a ruthless manipulator willing to trample on anyone in order to maintain power in his hands. Burt bluntly referred to him as the Predator, beneath human skin, a man unafraid to employ every possible scheme to destroy anyone who dared to oppose him. Douglas not only manipulated casting sessions or exerted pressure on producers, but also abused his power to engage in improper behavior with young actresses. One of the most chilling stories Burt revealed was about actress Lisa Avery, who was removed from a major film project in 1959, simply because she refused Kirk's private dinner invitation. That was by no means a coincidence, but a deliberate, calculated act intended to punish anyone unwilling to bow to his will. And this story was only a fragment of the many cases of abuse of power and manipulation that Kirk Douglas carried out throughout his career. Not stopping there, Douglas also exploited his fame and prestige as tools to dominate those around him. He even turned illegal substances into weapons to control and force others into submission. Kirk bought and used them to compel directors, producers, and even co-stars to comply with his demands. Anyone who dared to resist had to pay a brutal price, either being cast out of projects or pushed into dangerous situations that no one dared to speak out about. Kirk Douglas, beneath the glamorous facade of a Hollywood star, was in reality a monster willing to destroy anyone who happened to stand in the way of his pursuit of power. And if you think the story of Douglas was already too cruel, prepare to move on to the next account, where Natalie Wood emerges a woman with a fragile beauty, but behind those gentle eyes lay a strategist brimming with calculation, deception, and a chilling ability to manipulate. 2. Natalie Wood, the fake tears used to manipulate others. Behind the fragile image of Natalie Wood, the woman known worldwide for her profoundly sorrowful eyes was in fact a ruthless manipulator, willing to employ any scheme to protect her power and maintain her influence. At one point, Natalie forced a fellow actor into a difficult situation just to have him removed from a project simply because she did not like him. On set, she once staged a fainting scene right in the middle of filming, causing the entire crew to halt for more than 10 hours, all for the sole purpose of creating pressure to force the producer to dismiss her co-star. Her manipulative control silenced everyone around her. No one dared to speak up, for they understood that even the slightest resistance would threaten their careers and could shatter everything in an instant. Burt also implied that Natalie Wood's death in 1981 was not exactly an accident, but rather a price to be paid for the scheme she had employed. A journalist from The Hollywood Reporter revealed that just weeks before her death, Natalie openly threatened to ruin the career of a close friend if that person did not comply with every demand she made. The mysterious death aboard the yacht that year became a dark stain in Hollywood's history as a flood of rumors and Natalie's deceitful relationships began to surface. Burt Lancaster once wrote a chilling line: "The sea did not kill her. It only concealed what she left behind on the shore." Natalie Wood's death was not merely the conclusion of a tragic life, but the inevitable consequence of the wrongful actions she had sown throughout her career. And if the story of Natalie Wood has already sent chills down your spine, do not leave just yet, for next comes Mickey Rooney, a man whose approachable exterior concealed ruthless schemes more vicious than you could possibly imagine. 3. Mickey Rooney, the man who took pleasure in tormenting others with words. Mickey Rooney frequently hurled mocking remarks directly at background actors right in front of the entire crew over nothing more than trivial details, such as their hairstyle or the clothes they were wearing. He did not merely humiliate others, he relished watching them crumble before his eyes, then laughed with satisfaction, as if he had just secured a victory, Burt recorded. Throughout his career, Mickey Rooney was not only famous for his cheerful, humorous roles on the silver screen, but he also became notorious as a man who frequently abused his wives. Burt Lancaster recounted that Rooney treated his wives like slaves within his own home, forcing them into mental servitude while using violence to control their every action and daily habit. Rooney's marriages were never true love stories, but rather dark performances of power in which he manipulated, oppressed, and broke the will of his wives until they were left completely incapable of resistance. One of the most terrifying instances of abuse occurred in 1967 when Rooney slapped his wife across the face on set simply because she had delayed the work schedule, leaving her scarred both physically and emotionally. His failed marriages were not the sad endings of love stories, but instead a continuous chain of domestic violence where his victims remained trapped in a vicious cycle of manipulation and abuse with no escape. With such crimes, Rooney not only destroyed his co-stars on set, but also left behind horrifying traumas that haunted those who had once been closest to him in real life. 4. Elizabeth Taylor, the storm hidden behind the violet eyes. The fourth person on this list is none other than Elizabeth Taylor, the resounding symbol of power in Hollywood. In 1962, during the filming of Cleopatra at Cinecittà Studios in Rome, Taylor locked herself inside her dressing room and refused to let anyone in simply because a fellow actress happened to wear a dress in a similar color to hers. As a result, the entire crew was forced to halt production for 14 long hours until her unreasonable fury subsided. When the director firmly insisted on resuming the shoot, Taylor hurled a glass of wine directly into his face, leaving the entire set in a heavy, stunned silence. Elizabeth Taylor was not merely a famous star. She was the queen of manipulation, exerting control not only over the films she worked on, but also over the people around her. And that was only the surface of Elizabeth Taylor's darker schemes. By the 1960s, when she entered into marriage with Richard Burton, Taylor not only seized his career, but also wielded her influence to dominate Hollywood itself, forcing producers to bow to her every demand. For this reason, her marriages, from Mike Todd to Richard Burton, were never sweet love stories, but rather exchanges of power where Elizabeth Taylor deceived, usurped the wealth of men, and wielded authority to manipulate everything to her advantage. And after Elizabeth Taylor, the fifth person on this list will be revealed. One of the greatest stars in Hollywood history yet, behind that glorious career, lay a cruelty every bit as merciless. 5. Spencer Tracy, the man who always found a way to blame others. In his secret notebook, Burt Lancaster described Spencer Tracy as the devil in the dressing room, a man who always kept a fit of rage hidden behind every glass of liquor. Tracy's drunkenness was not a mere accident. It was a tool he used to instill terror and control those around him. He did not just drink to get drunk, he drank to inflict harm. Burt wrote portraying a Spencer Tracy who weaponized fear and violence to manipulate the entire crew. Tracy was not only famous for his profound and deeply layered performances, but also notorious for committing sexual assaults and acts of violence right on film sets. On one occasion in 1961, while filming Judgment at Nuremberg, he smashed a bottle of liquor on the dressing table simply because a makeup artist had made a minor mistake. But that was far from the whole story. Spencer Tracy also exploited his position and influence to intimidate and manipulate colleagues, forcing them to obey his will. He went so far as to abuse his power by violating the privacy of his co-stars, turning them into helpless victims in his ruthless game of dominance. The true nature of Spencer Tracy was not that of a revered silver screen legend, but of a cruel man, a power addict willing to destroy anyone who dared to resist him. He could play the saint with a smile, then threaten to commit suicide just to coerce his co-star into doing exactly what he wanted, Burt concluded. And next on the list, we will come to a man whose outward appearance seemed trustworthy, but beneath the surface was a cold and merciless monster, capable of spreading fear into the hearts of all who crossed his path. 6. James Stewart, the man who loved to judge others. James Stewart, with the image of the decent young man in It's a Wonderful Life and the righteous hero in Mr. Smith, Goes to Washington had long been considered a symbol of integrity in the eyes of the American public. Yet, according to Burt Lancaster, behind that glamorous facade was a ruthless judge willing to use every trick to secure his position. Stewart's habit was to quietly record every small mistake his co-stars made during filming, then secretly deliver those notes to the director after shooting ended, leaving his colleagues to live in constant fear and unease. But Stewart's cruelty did not stop there. One of the most shocking schemes Burt revealed occurred in 1957 when Stewart flatly refused to work alongside a black actor. He did not show open anger, but instead cleverly shifted all the blame onto what he called a script requirement, silencing everyone around him so that no one dared to object. Stewart not only exploited his power to manipulate, but also resorted to the most despicable tactics he once used, forged documents to denounce actors who dared to oppose him. With just a single falsified paper, Stewart was able to undermine another's reputation and force them to withdraw from a project. This was a ploy that no one dared to challenge for fear of humiliation or the loss of their career. He did not need to get angry. He only had to sit still, and the entire room would immediately feel unworthy to remain in his presence, Burt concluded. 7. Marilyn Monroe, the black hole that swallowed all of Hollywood. The next person mentioned on the list is none other than the legendary star Marilyn Monroe. Monroe was not only deceitful in her romantic relationships, but she also repeatedly bullied and harassed directors, co-stars, and even film studios, forcing them to comply with her demands, even when those demands were completely unreasonable and unacceptable. One of the most shocking stories Burt revealed took place during the filming of Some Like It Hot in 1959 in Hollywood. Throughout the production, Monroe frequently disappeared from the set without any prior notice, leaving the entire crew forced to stop working for hours on end, as if all they could do was pray for her return. She did not just pretend to be fragile. She used that very fragility to control everyone, Burt wrote. These actions not only caused disruption, but also deeply disturbed the work and lives of those around her. Yet the reality was even worse. Monroe also resorted to deceit in her romantic affairs to manipulate men in positions of power. In 1961, she began a secret relationship with film producer Jack Warner, and when he asked her to collaborate with another actor, Monroe orchestrated an intense emotional crisis. She pressured Warner into making a decision that served only her interests, throwing the set into chaos, while those around her were left to endure pain and loss, all because of her greed and deceit. And what about Errol Flynn, the man Hollywood once celebrated as a hero? What dark secrets would Burt bring to light about him in this list? 8. Errol Flynn, the devil, disguised as a charmer. Errol Flynn, with his captivating smile and glamorous presence in Captain Blood and the Adventures of Robin Hood, once left all of Hollywood utterly enthralled. Yet, according to Burt, behind that outward appearance, Flynn was not merely a man who lived recklessly and wildly, but someone who relentlessly exploited his power to control and destroy those around him. He frequently hosted debauched parties where drugs called girls and violence intertwined into dark and haunting spectacles. The victims of these gatherings never dared to speak out, for the wealth and power Flynn held in his hands forced them into silence. And it did not end there. Flynn also used his connections to escape serious crimes. A striking example was when he was arrested for drug trafficking. He immediately leveraged his influence within the industry to secure his release, allowing him to continue committing further offenses without ever facing consequences. The women he seduced, deceived, and exploited were treated as nothing more than tools for his gratification, and once they no longer served a purpose, he discarded them without hesitation. Flynn was not only abusive and violent, but a monstrous figure with no boundaries and no limits. However, the story of Flynn is not the final stop. We will continue on to uncover another figure, a legend once celebrated by Hollywood. But behind the glittering spotlight lurked a manipulator of power steeped in crimes and buried in dark secrets. 9. Bing Crosby, the man who always forced others to submit to him. Bing Crosby, a talented actor with a calm demeanor, always maintained a quiet exterior and never once revealed anger or raised his voice in public. Yet the true hell lay behind the doors of his private home, where cruelty and manipulation reached their peak. He constantly tormented his own children with eyes colder and harder than steel, Lancaster wrote in his notebook, describing how Bing could use nothing more than a single glance to mentally torture the members of his family. Burt also recalled one incident when Bing forced his son to stand outside in the freezing yard stripped of his shirt, all because of a poor grade, to know what failure feels like. It was not only mental torment, he also directly threatened them with physical violence, turning abuse into a method of control over his children and family members. Later on, Bing's own son, Gary Crosby, confirmed it all. "I would rather be the child of anyone else, even a criminal, than be his son." Those bitter words stood as living proof of the evil that Bing had sown within his very own household. So, did these crimes ultimately leave lasting consequences? Let us follow the story of his own son, Gary Crosby. 10. Gary Crosby, the distorted copy of Bing Crosby. According to Burt Lancaster's account, Gary was not only a victim of cruelty, but gradually became a twisted replica of his father, a man who had beaten him throughout his childhood with a golf club. As he grew older, Gary repeatedly became entangled in violent behavior. He was accused of abusing his girlfriend, assaulting others over trivial reasons, and even smashing the windshield of a director's car simply because he had not been invited to dinner. But that was not the end. Gary was also accused of drug use, involvement in prostitution, and attacking innocent people merely to vent his rage and lack of self-control. He does not know how to love. The only thing he knows is how to make people afraid, because that is the only language his father left him, Burt wrote. Lancaster described Gary as living proof that evil is not always born, but can be taught, repeated, and drilled into someone until it seeps into their blood. Gary's violence, his drug abuse, and his acts of exploitation were the inevitable consequences of a childhood raised in brutality, which pushed him to continue repeating the same vicious mistakes that Bing had imprinted on his life. And if the story of Gary Crosby has already left you shaken, then brace yourself for the next chapter about Henry Fonda, a man once regarded as the very model of perfection. But behind that modest exterior lay a cold and ruthless figure willing to destroy anyone just to preserve his power and influence. 11. Henry Fonda, the invisible judge of Hollywood. The 11th person on the list that Burt Lancaster mentioned was none other than Henry Fonda. He was renowned for his iconic performances in The Grapes of Wrath and 12 Angry Men, and was celebrated throughout Hollywood as a symbol of justice. Yet, according to Lancaster behind that shining facade, Fonda was in truth a master manipulator, someone who did not need violence, but could destroy others with nothing more than his cold silence. He did not kill anyone with his hands, he killed with his silence, Burt wrote in his secret notes. Beneath the image of a righteous hero, Fonda was also a father who tormented his own family emotionally, as his children never once felt genuine love from him. Jane Fonda admitted that she grew up in the heavy shadow of a father who never offered blessings, only control, using authority to force his children into submission. And it did not stop within the family. Fonda even drove colleagues into such despair that they resorted to suicide simply to prove his power. With his cruelty in both personal and professional relationships, he stood as living proof that power does not always require violence, but can be maintained through fear and cold manipulation. And if the story of Henry Fonda has already sent chills down your spine, then brace yourself for the next chapter about another Hollywood star who seemed flawless on the outside, but beneath that appearance lay dark and shocking secrets no one could have ever imagined. 12. Jane Fonda, the brainwasher behind an angelic face. Jane not only pushed the careers of those around her to the brink of collapse, but also weaponized extremist ideals as tools of pressure, forcing everyone to take sides. She exploited the power of her fame to manipulate minds, leaving others with no choice but to obey her or else face ostracism and exposure through the schemes she so skillfully orchestrated. 13. Joan Crawford, the one who always used violence to solve everything. And then, closing this list, is yet another Hollywood star, someone whose outward image seemed flawless and impeccable, but who concealed within a cold and ruthless soul ready to destroy the career of anyone daring to stand against them. 14. Lucille Ball, the razor-blade smile of terror. Lucille Ball was once regarded as the very embodiment of joy and optimism for the American people. Yet, according to Burt Lancaster, when the studio lights went out, that laughter ceased to be a symbol of happiness and instead became a weapon of control, sowing fear and psychological domination. She didn't just write scripts. She wrote the lives of others and tore them apart when they no longer served her purpose, Burt recorded in his secret journal. As the head of Desilu, Lucille was described as a psychological dictator, one who tolerated no obstacle to her power. Lancaster revealed that she kept a special notebook in which she meticulously recorded every small mistake of her employees, from the way they smiled to the way they knocked on a door. Anyone who committed an offense 3 times would be dismissed immediately without explanation. On one occasion, Lucille forced a screenwriter to rewrite an entire script within 24 hours, only to summon him in the middle of a meeting, laugh loudly, and hurl the manuscript straight into his face. That laugh once saved CBS, Burt emphasized, but it was also the very same laugh that shattered the spirits of dozens of people under her rule. Yet Lucille's cruelty did not end there. She even had secret microphones installed in meeting rooms to eavesdrop and determine who was truly loyal to her. And once she discovered anyone who dared to defy her, the consequences they faced were impossible to predict. And those are the secrets that had never been revealed about Hollywood's legendary stars. People who, behind the dazzling glow of fame, concealed an entire world of sin manipulation and ruthless cruelty. Burt Lancaster chose to expose it all like a blood-stained warning bell, laying bare the dark corners that Hollywood has always desperately tried to hide. So what about you? What do you think of these stars? In your opinion, who is truly the most ruthless of them all? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss any of the shocking stories yet to come.